Hey, good people, good morning. What a week it's been. Heck, what a week of emotional roller coaster stuff. From the joy and the victory of Palm Sunday, Jesus coming in, declaring himself unapologetically the King, Jesus weeping over Jerusalem and the people who rejected him, and then the whole emotional time of the rest of the week, fighting with the Pharisees, throwing out the temple people, just high drama. You couldn't make a movie that would epitomize as much drama as we find in this particular week. But now we come to Saturday, and all of a sudden we see things going in a different tone altogether, because it's the Sabbath day, and the people in that legalistic world would not have wanted to do certain things. But we do see Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus coming to claim very courageously the body of Jesus. These two people who up until now had been secret disciples, is what they call themselves, now coming boldly to claim the body of Jesus. We wonder what the disciples were doing at that particular time. And I have said probably more than once how the disciples were running around like chicken without heads, how they were in panic mode, how they were saying, well, our expectations have not been met. We thought he was going to be the king, and a king that we would understand and want, and our expectations were blown because he wasn't that. We see how they would have said, you know, the crucifixion, man, we certainly didn't expect that our king would be a king for a day and maybe a few extra days, but for our king to die in that way, man, we didn't expect that either. And then they're asking themselves probably, well, what now? What can we expect? All our expectations have been trashed and blown away so far. What now can we expect? And all they were doing was looking into the belly button of hopelessness and pondering themselves and thinking, well, what do we do now? And the question I want to ask today is, what do you do when you don't know what to do? Those disciples didn't have a clue what really to do right now. And so they did what I think was a good thing. But I want to try and maybe even correct some of the things I may have said in the past, because there's one verse that changes everything. At the end of the book of Luke, chapter 28, in the last verse, it says that the disciples rested. They rested. Now here I am in my mind painting a picture of these guys running every which way and not making any progress in a state of panic. But here we read that the disciples rested. I got to tell you, people, after any emotional trauma, after any great disappointment, resting is probably the last thing on your mind. But if you look back and maybe with a broader vision of these disciples, resting was the best thing that they could have done. It always is. Replenishing your strength for the next phase that you don't know what it's going to be. So far, your expectations have been trashed. They haven't been what you thought they were going to be. But you do know that life goes on, and there will be things that you will need to prepare yourself for, and you don't want to arrive at those things, whether they be good or whether they be bad or whether they be indifferent. You don't want to arrive there in a state of weariness, exhaustion, and the tank being empty. So the disciples rested. That's a good thing to do. But when we rest, it's not a matter of just parking off doing nothing. When they were resting, they were doing other stuff. I would surmise that they were remembering. Hey guys, what did Jesus say? Remember that conversation? Peter, what did Jesus say about 3 days? Remember, he told us many times that we didn't understand or we chose not to understand. Jesus said something about dying and coming back to life again. Peter, just remind us about that. They would spend time remembering. They would have spent time reminding themselves a bit of that. They would have spent their time reflecting to say, man, this is amazing. And as they were doing those things, they were strengthening their souls in a state of rest that involved remembering, reminding, and recounting the things that Jesus had said and had done. This would have strengthened their souls for the Sunday. Now, I know in the Sunday, it looks like the disciples didn't remember anything. You know, there they were, you know, doubting, and Thomas was doubting, and the disciples were not in a position to receive. But who can blame them? Who can blame them for suddenly being so confused that he who was dead has now become alive? And I don't want to knock them for that, because I think Resting is the key at any time of terrible emotional stress or trauma. Now I know that you know that I'm talking to some of you. You've been through that. Maybe not quite to the same extent as the disciples had done, but your hope has been crucified to another cross, and your hope has died, and your hope, everything you hoped of, has been a disappointment. It's not what you expected. Your business, your marriage, your relationships, your whatever. It wasn't what you expected, and your hope has been crucified as their hope, Jesus, was crucified, as now dead. What do you do when you don't know what to do? You rest. You rest. You just rest. And in your resting, you're reflecting on things. You're reflecting on who Jesus is and what he has done. You're reflecting on the things that you do know about Jesus. There's a great Old Testament example about this. Habakkuk, the prophet, he was confused with the way that God was doing stuff. He knew that God had to kind of, in a sense, discipline the children of Israel, but he was so confused that he was doing it the way that he was. And so in his confusion, he goes to God and he says to God, "What are you doing? I'm so confused. It's not what I expected." And God said, "Nothing." And so he goes, Habakkuk does a good thing. He finds himself a quiet place and he reflects on the things that he knows about God. He reflects on the things that are important, and in his reflection and in his remembering, he strengthens his own soul. That could be a good thing for you to do. On this time, any time you've been through tragedy and sadness and trauma, resting, reflecting, remembering, recommitting, rededicating, all the re's are great reasons and things that we should be doing at a time like that. Let's learn from the disciples. Time like this, it's a good time just to rest. Can you do that? I hope so. Cheers, guys. Bye.